Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie if you're new, and today we're going to be swatching A England, which is a new to me brand. They're a British-based beauty brand inspired by art, architecture, history, and culture, like the masterpiece Dracula, which is the inspiration behind this collection called Bram, Stoker, and the Count. I was also sent their In Memoriam Duo and a gorgeous flaky topper, and I'm also going to have some comparisons at the end, but let's just get into the swatches. First, we're starting with the Armor base coat, which is a pretty standard clear base coat, and this one has a wide paddle brush, which I actually really love because it just makes application such a breeze. So this is what I'll be using under all of my swatches. The first polish in the collection is Dracula, which is described as a fierce magenta with linear holographic. The formula on this one was absolutely beautiful. It's so incredibly full coverage, but still very smooth to apply. It doesn't feel thick at all. I was honestly so impressed by how vibrant and opaque this was on the first coat. But I know sometimes I can be heavy-handed, but honestly, this feels like a one-coat polish. And you know I absolutely love the color of this one. It's for sure one of my top favorites. Next up we have Mina, which is a light periwinkle with linear holo. So you might notice the different brush. For whatever reason, Dracula had more of a regular flat brush that was a little bit more narrow, but the rest had paddle brushes like this one, which I, again, do really like since it helps you achieve cleaner application. So while this one also had a smooth formula, I'm just not sure if I didn't let my base coat dry down or I didn't grab enough polish, but I definitely needed to do 2 coats for this shade to make this one fully opaque. I didn't mind it though, since I love how the color is just more noticeable on the second coat. I feel like usually with lighter holographics, it can look a little silvery on the first coat. The holo might not be as noticeable here compared to the last polish, for example, because this one is just such a light shade and, again, not in the sun, but it definitely is still there and so beautiful. The next shade is Transylvania, which is described as a Persian blue with linear holo. So I think this is such a gorgeous mid-tone shade of blue. It's almost like just a very true primary blue, but there is a bit of dustiness to it. And again, I am just so impressed with the formula of this one. This was another one that was opaque for me in just 1 coat, probably because it was a little bit darker, and I just love how strong these holos are, even when they're not in direct sunlight. Next up we have Bat Wings, which is a black linear holographic with a twinkling violet red shimmer that I unfortunately had a hard time capturing, but maybe you'll see some sparkles here and there. This was another 1-coat polish for me, which I'm sure you were maybe expecting at this point, especially considering this is a black, but I just really love how cool this one feels, especially when you do get that glimpse of that subtle shimmer. The only thing that I will say though is that I feel like this polish did have a little bit of texture or just a little bit of grittiness in some spots. The next shade is Whitby Abbey, which is described as a cool storm gray with violet undertones. So I'm sorry for getting repetitive, but the formula on this one was just that same buttery smooth one that we've seen with the other shades. And again, it just totally blew my mind with how fully opaque it was on the first coat. So this one I was a little iffy on, even though I love a good gray steel blue kind of shade. It just didn't stand out to me at first, but I changed my mind. The next shade is Van Helsing, which is a Twilight Plum linear holo. This one is actually described as a deep red with blue violet undertones on the website, which I don't agree with, but either way, this is easily my favorite from the collection. I absolutely love a plummy purple, and this one is just so alluring. Of course, it has that same flawless formula that we've seen with the other ones, and yeah, this is definitely just going to be a favorite of mine come around the fall season, but I just am so happy I had a chance to wear this, at least for a little bit. The next polish in the collection is called the Wild Rose, which is described as a green gold linear holo with muted olive undertones. So even though it's described as having gold, I feel like it still leans very cool toned, which I forget is possible with gold. I just always associate gold with warm and silver with cool, but anyway, personally, this is my least favorite in terms of color, but I still appreciate how unique it is, especially to my collection, and the good news is that it has the same amazing formula, and it was opaque in one coat, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on this shade. I think I would have loved it more if it was deeper. And the last shade in this collection is called Love Song for a Vampire, which is a moonstone blue with linear holo. I personally would call this more of a cerulean blue, but either way, I absolutely loved this one. It was another fully opaque formula for me that was just so satisfying to apply, and this blue is just so vibrant. I do worry that there is going to be a staining issue, especially if you wear these for a long time, which unfortunately I don't. So I would suggest doubling up on base coat. Next, for the In Memoriam Duo, the first polish is called Forget Me Not, which is a delicate angel blue with linear holo. So I had really great coverage on the first coat, but I found this was the only other polish that needed a second coat for full opacity, probably due to the fact that, again, this was just so much lighter than a lot of the other shades that we've seen. It does build up so beautifully on two coats, and again just kind of makes the color pop a little bit more. And while the holo isn't as visible here the same way that it wasn't in the periwinkle shade, it still looks so sparkly in real life. But honestly, I kind of like how powdery and almost velvet it looks. Like if you throw a matte top coat on this, I feel like it would look almost suede, if you're into that. The other shade in the duo is called Elizabeth, which is described as a vivid royal violet linear holo with blue undertones. This one was another one coater for me, and again, it just had such a beautiful formula, and application was just such a dream. Like, it is so satisfying to apply these polishes. I really love the shade of purple too. I usually have a hard time with mid-tone purples. I don't really gravitate towards them that much, but I feel like this one is just so beautiful. And lastly, we have their holographic topper called the Wizard. So I wanted to show this over Elizabeth, and it gives really great coverage where you don't need to fish around for the little holo flakies, or you don't have to do multiple coats. I feel like doing one is perfectly fine. I think it adds such a beautiful touch of extra holographic if the linear wasn't enough for you. You can see when I'm putting my nail a little bit closer to the camera and it's out of focus just how much it sparkles. But here I am showing it over my bare nail just so you can really see how many flakies are in here on just one coat. Even though this one is a topper, it still had a really great and smooth formula where it didn't feel chunky or anything to apply. And I really do like how these are an irregular flaky as opposed to a more uniform hex glitter, for example. So for comparisons, I wanted to show how Dracula compares to Mooncat's Venus Flytrap, which is the only other intense hot pink linear holo in my collection. Mooncat looks like it has way more holo in the bottle, so it might seem a little alarming, but once it's on the nail, you can see the difference isn't really that drastic. It's, if anything, maybe a little underwhelming. If anything, I would also say there's more of a color difference where Mooncat is a little darker and more red leaning, and it also had more of a sheer formula where this is 2 coats of Mooncat versus 1 coat of Dracula. Next up, I wanted to show you Mina and Forget Me Not side by side because they at first looked the same to me, but as you can see, they definitely have some differences even though they are pretty subtle. Again, Mina is more of a periwinkle and Forget Me Not is more of a baby blue. I thought that Mooncat's Shattered Glass might be a better color comparison, but it ended up just being way different, where Mooncat is a little bit more of a red leaning purple and also a little bit darker as well. I also wanted to show a quick side-by-side of Transylvania and Love Song for a Vampire because they're just two blues in the collection, but definitely very different. So for Elizabeth, we're bringing back Shattered Glass, and it makes for a much better color comparison here. Again, the holo looks way more intense in Mooncat's bottle, but they end up looking pretty similar on the nail. So I'm going to be showing one coat of each so you can see the difference in their formula and just what I meant where the Mooncat polishes are just a little bit more sheer, where you can see through to my nail line a little bit easier, and the A England shade is just fully opaque. But again, once it's on two coats, I feel like these two could basically pass for dupes. There is a subtle color difference, but I just don't think it's enough to warrant having both, maybe, but you'll have to let me know. Next up for Van Helsing, I actually have this polish from Painted Polish called Purple Rain, which I don't think is around anymore, but it is just one of my absolute favorite purples from my collection. This is another very similar plummy kind of holographic purple, but once on the nail, you can see that they aren't exactly dupes. Painted Polish is more of a warmer toned and has a little bit more of a scattered holo effect, and Van Helsing is a little bit cooler toned, at least to me, and more of that linear effect. And lastly, for the Wizard, I knew I had to compare it to Holo Taco's Flakie Taco. So Flakie Taco is supposed to have those irregular holo flakies, as the name suggests, but I feel like my bottle was one of those weird ones that included a lot of the kind of little bar glitters, so I don't end up using it that much. But anyway, when I show one coat side by side on the nail, I feel like they're pretty indistinguishable. So you'll have to let me know if you would consider these dupes, and also if you have the Flakie Taco. Is yours the normal one, or does yours have those little bar glitters? Because I'm just not a fan. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of A England's Bram Stoker and the Count collection and their In Memoriam Duo and Wizard top coat. I decided to do a little skittle with all of the polishes except for the Flakie top coat, and I just think they're so pretty together. So I wanted to lay them out this way so that way you can see the full color story, because initially I was a little put off by it because so many of them just felt the same to me. And I know some people like that and others definitely do not. So let me know where you land with that, because while some of them might be in different collections or whether they're in the same collection, I do feel like some are just a little too similar to each other, but they are all individually gorgeous. Like I mentioned in the intro, A England is a British brand, but they do have international stockists, so I will link their website in the description box for you to check out if you're interested. But I definitely would love to hear any and all thoughts that you have either on this collection or this brand, especially if you have tried them, because I am just so impressed with the quality, the coverage, the pigmentation. So I'm a huge fan, but I can't wait to hear what your thoughts are. But as always, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.